Very good morning, students. Welcome back to the online classes. Today, we are going to start a new chapter called as constructors and destructors. Before getting into this chapter, we'll check it out. What is the weightage of this chapter? In this chapter, we have one 2-mark question and one from the 5 marks question. Totally, we are going to have 7 marks of marks in this chapter. Before getting into it, we'll see that what are the topics we are going to cover in this chapter. We are going to cover the declaration and definition of a constructors, types of constructors like default constructors, parametric constructors, copy constructors, and constructor overloading, and destructors. These are the different topics which are going to cover in this chapter. Overall, this chapter, it's very important chapter where we can gain a 7 marks from this chapter. Let us see briefly into the next slide. Yeah, what is in constructors? A constructor is a special kind of a class member function that is automatically called when an object of a class is initialized. When it has been called automatically when an object of a class is initialized. Constructors are typically used to initialize member variables of the class to appropriate default or user provided values or to do any step up necessary for the class to be used. Normally member function constructors have special rules for how they must be named. Firstly, the constructor must have the same name as the class. Constructor must have the same name as a class. Constructor have no written values. Constructor is automatically called when an object is created. Constructor is automatically called when an object is created. If we do not specify constructor, C++ compiler generates a default constructor for us. If we do not specify a constructor, C++ compiler generates a default constructor for us. A major difference between the constructor versus member functions. Now that we know that what is a constructor, let us discuss how a constructor is different from member function of the class. First, the constructor does not have any written value, but member function has a written value. The first difference is the constructor does not have any written value, but member function has a written type. Second difference, the constructor is automatically called when we create an object of a class. Constructor is automatically called when we create an object of a class. But member function need to be called explicitly used object by a class. Member function need to be called explicitly used object of a class. When the third difference, when do do not create any constructor. When we do not create any constructor in a class, C++ compiler generates a default constructors and insert into a code. The same does not apply onto the member functions. These are the difference between the member function and the constructors. Once again, I'll come again. What is constructors? Constructor is a special member function that is called automatically when an object is created. The main purpose of the constructor is to mainly initialize a member variables of a class. The main purpose of a constructor is to mainly initialize a member variable of the class. This is called as a constructor. Let us see the syntax into the next. Before Seeing the syntax, let us see what is the need of a constructors and the rules for the constructors. The first need is to initialize the objects. To initialize an object. To avoid the garbage values. To avoid the garbage values. Third need is sometimes object have to be initialized before using them. Sometimes object have to be initialized before using them. To initialize an objects, normally we call member function. Normally we used to call a member functions without making a separate call to the member function. We can initialize the objects through the constructors. These are the major needs for the constructor to be constructed in your program. Here we have a general syntax for the constructor. Here we have a class. Class is a keyword. Class is a keyword followed by the class name. And I have started my class with my classes consist of two access specifier, private as well as your public. And I have created my constructor with the name of a same as a class name of a class name. This is how you're going to create a constructor. The class name and the member function name are identical. Let us see in the next slide with an example. Once we see an example, we can have a clear picture how to create a constructors. Here we have an example for the constructors. Let us take this example. I have created a class name called as a test. And I have created a class which consists of three data members, that is M, X, Y. Without the defaultly, it is considered as a private. And I have created a constructor called as a test. Test is a constructor by using the same name of a class, and I have initialized two values for a x as well as a y. I have initialized x is equals to 0 and y is equals to 0. Once an object is created, automatically the constructor start executing. The value of x is equals to 0 and value of y is equals to 0, that is initialized for the two variables. This is how you are going to create a constructors. Here we have very important topic, that is types of constructors. In the types of constructors we have three different types of constructors. First one is default constructor, and also we can call it as zero argument constructor. Second type is parameterized constructors. Third one is copy constructors. These are the different types of constructors. I'll come again. The types of constructors are default constructor, can also call as zero argument constructor. Second one, parameterized constructors. Third one is copy constructors. Let us discuss one by one from the next slide. Now we will see the first type, that is default constructors. A default constructor, if no constructor is defined in a class, then the compiler automatically creates one for the program. This constructor, which is created by the compiler when there is no user defined constructors and which does not take any parameter, is called default constructors. A default constructor is a type of constructors which does not take any argument, It is also called as a zero argument constructors. We'll see the syntax for it. It is where you're going to have the class name, scope resolution operator, and the class name. Here we have going to create a constructors. Here, what is that default constructors, in the sense where we are not going to pass any arguments. For an example, we have a student. Students is a constructor which I created. In a student constructor, I have never passed any argument within a function. These type of constructors, we call that as a default constructors. Let us see what are the features of default constructor. The major features of default constructors is, for every object which we create, the constructor is automatically called. For every object created, this constructor is automatically called. All objects of a class are initialized to the same set of values. What is that? All objects of a class are initialized to the same set of values. If different objects are to be initialized with the different values, it cannot be done by using a default constructors. These are the major features of default constructors. Let us see an example for a default constructors. Here we have an example for initializing a value using a default constructors. I have created a class in this program. Just we are going to pass a values for the two variables. So I have created a class called as an x, and I have two variables, that is data members of a and b, which is initialized into a private. And I have created one constructors, that is default constructors. The constructor which is having a same name of a class as x where we have initialized a default constructors. When you observe that function, I have never passed any parameters into x function. This we call it as a default function, default constructors. In this default constructors, I am passing a value a for the 10 and b to the 20. And now I have created a constructors. And let us go to the main program. Once you go for the main program, I have created a two objects, x object 1 and object 2. Once object 1 is created, automatically the value of a is equals 10 is assigned. Why? Because once an object is created, a default constructor is being accessed. There is no need of using any object to be access the constructors. Once I access object1.display, it is going to access the member function called as a void display cout a. And cout a, once I give it as cout a, it is going to display as a is equals to 10 and b is equals to 20. Here, once you observe in a program, I never called any constructor function. Once an object is created, automatically the constructor is invoked. This type of invocation, we tell that it is a default constructors. I have accessed my display function for the two times. That is object1 dot display and object2 dot display. Once I access it two times, my output is to be printed two times. One is a value is 10 and b value is 20. Once you observe the output of this program, it has been displayed 10 and 20 two times. And here in this program, I have never called any function as x. Once an object is created, the x constructor is executed. This is a simple program for betterment of knowing the what is default constructors. I hope so that today's class, if students have been clearly understood what is a default. After seeing the example of a default constructors, and we also seen that what is a default constructors, and also we have discussed about a one example of a default constructors. Now we'll move on to the disadvantages of default constructors. The major drawback of the constructor is that every instance of a class will be initialized to the same value. It will be initialized to the same value, and it is not possible to initialize an element each instance of class to a different value. Each instance of a class with a different value. That is one of the major drawback which we have it onto the default constructors. And default constructors initialize all numerical fields in the class to 0, all strings and objects fields to a null. What it does, the default constructor initialize all the numerical fields into a classes to a 0. It is initialize all the numerical field as a 0. All the strings and object field as a null. initialize ಏನು ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ? What is going to do? The numbers or a numerical field is being given as a 0 and all strings as a null. Let us see the major key points of a disadvantage of default constructor. When many objects of the same class are created, all objects are initialized to the same set of value by the default constructors. It is not possible to initialize a different objects with a different initial value using a default constructors. We'll come again. What are the disadvantages we have? When many objects of a same class are created. When a many object is created in a same class, all objects are initialized to same set of value, initialized to the same set of values by default constructors. It is not possible to initialize a different objects with a different initial value using a default constructors. These are the different disadvantages which you have it onto the default constructors. Let us move on to the next topic, that is parametric constructors. Parametric constructors. What is that parametric constructors? Parametric constructors may be defined as a kind of constructor, may be defined as a kind of constructors that needs some value to be passed in it, some value to be passed in it, so that those could be used by the variable defined in the constructors. The value that have to be passed can mention by the time of initialization, can mention by the time of initialization of a variable. When it comes to the declaration part of the parametric constructor, we will need to use a return type. We need to use a return type at the declaration time. The constructor name, the brackets and the parameters that will be used to bring the values in it. The brackets and parameters are used to bring the values in it. It is used similarly to the default constructor, and the only thing it is addition in the parametric is nothing but adding up values in the parameters. The definition of a parametric constructor is the constructor that takes one or more arguments. It takes one or more arguments is called as parametric constructors. Once again, I'll repeat you. A constructor that takes one or more argument is called as parametric constructors. Now, let us see what are the features of parametric constructors. The major features is the using its constructor, it is possible to initialize different objects with different set of values. Now, we'll come again for the clear one. Using the constructor, it is possible to initialize a different object with a different set of values. It is invoked automatically. It invokes automatically whenever the object with an arguments are created. It invokes automatically when objects with the arguments are created. A parametric constructors can be overloaded. Parametric constructors can be overloaded. Parameterized constructor can have a default value. We'll come again all the features. Again once, using the constructor, it is possible to initialize a different objects with different set of values. Using the constructor, it is possible to initialize different objects with a different set of values. It is invoked automatically whenever the objects with arguments are created. Parameterized constructor can be overloaded. Parametric constructor can be overloaded. A parameterized constructor can have a default value. These are the different features which comes across your parametric constructors. Now we'll see the example program for the parametric constructors. Here we have an example program for the parametric constructors. We have example program for parametric constructors. That is a simple program. Here we have a small simple program to find a cube. Here we are going to write a main program called as a class name called as cube. And before getting into the class, we'll just see the main program. The main program starts with void main. Here I have created a cube is a class name followed by an object. The object is C1. object is C1 where I have passed an argument, where I have been passed a value. We can also tell that it is an argument 10. A 10 which is to be, it's a parametric, the value which is being given within a parenthesis, we tell that it is a parametric. In this program here you can find I have created a three objects, that is nothing but C1, C2 and C3. C1, C2 and C3 are the three objects created and passing as different arguments, like different values. That is C1 is an object which holds a value of 10, and C2 is an object which holds a value of 20, and object C3 which holds a value of 30. Now, as you know that when I use a constructor, once an object is created, automatically the execution takes place. Now once a c1 is created, automatically it executes a function telling that a cube is a class name. In that we have created a constructor, the constructor which has the same name of a class. Once a first object is created, the value of C1 value 10 has been passed to the x. Now int x value was 10. Now automatically it executes side is equals to 10x into x. That is nothing but 10 into 10 into 10. And the result which is being stored inside the side has been initialized in the int, in a public sector, so the side which is going to hold the result of the cube value of the c1 object, that is x into x. Now the side x into x value is being stored into the side. Once again, once a second object is created as c2, the automatically the value of 20 will be passed to the x. Now x value is 20. Now the x value is 20 and it is going to calculate x into x, and the 20 into 20 into 20, that will be stored into side. And lastly, we are going to pass a third object value, that is 30. Third value object is nothing but 30. Once object is created, the value is being passed. Once after passing all the values, C dot one side, first object is access c1 dot side. Once I access the side, the first value which is being stored in the c1 value, that will be printed. And the same as cout c2, that is nothing but, once you talk about the c1, that is 10 into 10 into 10. What is that? 10 into 10, 100 into 10, 1000. That is the first value will be stored. Understood? The same thing for the c2 dot side, and third thing, that is c3 dot side. This is what a small example which we have seen for the parametric constructors. Now we'll just move on to the next topic. Here we are going to see that how we are going to invoke parameterized constructors. There are three methods of invoking the parameterized constructors. The first method is explicit call. Second method is implicit call. Third one is initializing at the time of declaration with assigning operator. What is that? Initializing at the time of declaration with assigning operator, or also we can also tell that equal sign. Now we will see one by one how we are going to invoke the parameterized constructor. Let us see first the explicit call. What is that explicit call? In explicit call, declaration of an object is followed by using assignment operator, You people already know that what is an assignment operator. In general mathematics we call that as an equal sign, which is called as an assignment operator, and constructor name, used by the constructor name with an argument list. How we are going to pass an argument list? In the sense, by using an enclosed in parenthesis. You know that how we are going to give a function, the same thing, but you are going to pass a value within the parenthesis. Let us see again what is explicit call. In explicit call, declaration of an object is followed by the assignment operator, followed by the assignment operator, constructor name, assignment operator with constructor name and argument list. How we are going to give an argument list? By enclosing in a parenthesis. Let us see the example for the explicit call. Here, after seeing the definition of the parametric constructor through explicit call, now we will see that with an example. First of all, before getting to this example program, again I just want to tell you that how to declare the object using a explicit call. In the definition, I already told you that explicit call, declaration of an object should be followed by the assignment operator, and it should be followed one more thing, that is the constructor name, and followed by the argument. In this program, let us see that where is that explicit call is declared. As you people have know that where the object is created, where an object is created, once a class name followed by the object. The same thing when you want to go for the explicit call, here I'm going to first create a object by using num. Num is my class name. Num is my class name, followed by an object. Here my object is object 1. Object 1. This is how we are going to create a normal object. Once you want to declare an object using an explicit call, as I told you that the object should be followed by an assignment operator, that is equal, normal mathematics symbol, that is equal symbol, and followed by the assignment operator, you are going to give a name of a constructor, You people already know that the constructor name will be the same as a class name. Yes, followed by the constructor, I'm going to give a parameter. How I'm going to give a parameter? In the sense, by using a parenthesis. That is open bracket as well as your close bracket. Here in this declaration, I have passed two arguments, that is nothing but 10 and 20. As the students, now we will come to know that the explicit call, where the explicit call is declared. Here again I have created a one more object, that is object 2, followed by the assignment operator. Num is nothing but the constructor name, followed by the arguments within an open and close brackets, within an open and close parenthesis. In the second object, I have been passed 40 and 50. This is nothing but the parameter which I have been passed. Now, if anybody asks you that where the declaration is being, in the sense a declaration is being given in where the object is created, that is object 1 and the object 2. Now you people could know that how to declare a explicit call using an object. Now here we have an example. Just to pass a value using an explicit call and display the same value. Now first we'll go for the main program. Once you go for the main program, here we have a main, that is void main. In a void main, I have created two objects, that is object 1 and object 2, using a explicit call. See out, once the object is created, you people know that once an object is created, using a constructor, the value will be passed. Automatically. Once a constructor is used, the value will be passed automatically. The first value was 10 and 20. 10 and 20, which is being passed for the first value as P as 10 and Q as 20. P as 10 as well as Q as 20. You people already know we have discussed a n number of class programs. You know that I have created a class called as a num. In a private, I have declared two data members, that is A and B. Num is a constructor. Here I have created a constructor called as a num. Num is a constructor. Once an object is created, the two values 10 and 20 is being passed for Q, P and Q. Now the constructor will pass the value. What is the value of P? The value of P is 10. The first value is 10, right? In the main program, the first 10 will be passed to the P and second value 20 will be passed for the Q. Now, using assignment operator, I'm going to pass the value of P, that is 10 is equals to A. That is, the 10 value it is being passed for A and 20 value will be passed by B. Again, I'm going to create a one more object called as an object. One more object called as an object 2. In the object 2 have been passed and 40 and 50, 40 and 50. Next, once the object is created, the second object is created. Obviously, the 40 will be passed to the P and Q. The 50 will be passed to the Q. Now, the values are being passed by using a explicit call. And next, after going for the main program, have written cout the first constructor. Cout the first constructor will be displayed. In output, the first constructor will be displayed, and I have accessed the member function. I have accessed the member function called as in display. Once I access the member function called as in display, what is the function I have written here? That is cout A is equals to the first value of A is 10 and B is equals to 20. The first object, which object is being accessed? Object 1 is accessed, so that the display is being displayed, telling that the first constructor A is equals to 10 and B is equals to 20. And secondly, when I go for this again for the main program, the cout the second constructor, that is nothing but the second constructor which is going to be printed onto the output screen. Once I access the object 2 dot display, once the function is accessed, automatically the second value is being passed. To the P, that is P is equals to 40 and Q is equals to 50. Then again P passes 40 to the A, again P passes 40 to the A, and Q passes 50 to the B. Now A value is 40 and B value is 50. Once I access the second object, automatically object 2 dot display, the member function of display is accessed. And it gives you the output as cout A is equals to 40 and B is equals to 50. This is how the explicit call passes a value in using a parametric constructors. Now you people can clearly understand how to declare the object using an explicit call. And now we'll go for betterment of one more understanding of explicit call. We'll go for the one more example in our next slide. Here we have a one more example for a professor details using an explicit call. Before getting into this program, we'll just check it out. Where is the explicit call located? Here, professor is my class name. I have created an object called as an P1. P1, when it is to be an explicit call, then it should be followed by the assignment operator, that is equal, followed by the constructor name called as a professor. Name called as a professor. The first thing, I'm going to pass the first value as int, that is 10. Second value, it is Aditya. It is a string, so I have given a 2 double quotes enclosed by the double quotes, comma, and the third value is for salary. I have given us 90,000. Here now in this example, you can clearly understand where we have declared the explicit call declaration for an object. Now let us go to this example program. This is an example program to accept just a name, salary of a professor, and ID. Once you go ahead with ID is for integer, name is for string, and salary is for float. And we have 3 different data types. One is integer, one is string, one is salary. Now let us go see the first. We'll see that in a class what are the things we have. In a class professor we have the public. In the public, I have declared the data member called as an ID, name, salary, and I have created one constructor called as an professor, which is going to hold a 3 arguments, int I, string n, and float s. This are the constructor which is going to hold, and I have that in a public. I have a three data members, that is name, salary, and the ID. And also I have created a member function called as a display. Member function called as a display. Now let us go to the main program. In a main program, I have created a professor, the two objects, that is P1 and P2. The two objects have been passing a two values, that is P1 professor, that is 10 for Aditya, and P2, that is the ID number 12, Anu is the second professor which have been passed a salary. Once I have passed a value for the object 1, that is object 1, that is P1 is equals to professor 10 and Aditya with a salary of 90. Once the first value was 10, so it is going to pass a value for I. Second value is string, so Aditya which is going to go for the n, and the third value was float, that is your salary, so I'm going to go for float s. This three value which is being passed once a object is created in a constructors. Now the second value is also being passed once a second object is been constructed. Now once you go ahead with all the value is being passed, by the two objects, that is P1 and the P2. Here you people have to clearly understand how we have been passed the values for then object P1 and the P2. Once in values has been passed, now I'm going to access by having a P1 dot display. P1 dot display, in the sense the member function has been accessed. In a P1 value, in a P1 values, what are the values was there? It is going to, once in display is accessed, P1, in a P1 cout ID, the first ID, that is 10, will be printed, and the name will be printed as the Aditya. And it is going to print a salary of 90,000. Now the first object value is being printed. Now we'll go for the second object is going to be displayed. Second object is going to display, that is P2 dot display. P2 dot display, in the sense already we have passed a value telling that 12 is an ID. 12 is an ID, that is the 12 passes to int I. The second Anu which passes to string n, and 60,000 which has been passed to float s. Now what is I value? I value is 12. 12 has been passed to the ID. 12 has been passed to the ID. What is the ID value now? 12. N value, what is the N value? N value is nothing but a string, that is Anu, which has been passed to the name. And next one, salary S, which is to be having 60. Once I access the second data display will display you the ID of Anu is 12, the name is Anu, and the salary is 60. This is how we are going to pass a value by explicit call. By seeing this two examples, I hope that you people can clearly understand the concept of it. So moving on to the next topic, we'll see that what are the assignments can be given for this session. Let us go and see what are the assignments should be completed for the next session. Here we have an assignment for today's session. Before getting into the assignments, I want to tell you that the sum of the topics which was being covered into the previous session itself, and we also already started the chapter, so we had a long time to continue this chapter. So I have been started this chapter from the beginning of the constructors and destructors. And before coming to the assignment, we'll see that what are the topics we have covered today. Today we have covered what is constructors, needs of constructors, features of constructors, syntax with an example, and also we have covered a major topic like types of constructors. In the types of constructors, we have seen default constructors and features of default constructors with an example, and also we have seen disadvantages of default constructors. And second type of parametric constructors, we have seen two examples, and invoking the parametric constructors, in that we have three. In that we have seen one constructors, that one constructors is nothing but explicit call. In that explicit call we have seen two examples of explicit call. And we have a today's assignment is what is constructors? Give its syntax with an example. Write the features of constructors, or you can also tell that rules of constructors. Explain default constructors with an example. Explain default constructors with an example. These are the different assignments which we have it onto today's session. Thank you, students. We'll see you in the next session.